Hi everybody, it's Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Hallmark Plus More, where we watch and talk about shows, movies, mysteries, Hallmark ornaments, and anything else that floats our boat. So today I'm going to be reviewing a Hallmark original series, The Way Home, Season 3, Episode 2. Before I get into the review, I just want to say thank you to everybody who likes, watches, subscribes to my channel. I appreciate you so much. So thank you for doing that. I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I do. It's filled with so many different scenes and flashbacks, and it's just hard to keep up, but it's still so exciting at the same time. And this episode was the same. It starts with a flashback and then it goes into present day. So the flashback was from the end of the last episode, season 3, episode 1. Where you're kind of going back to the 70s, where they hear Alice's voice on the record with Colton, and so then they realize, okay, at some point Alice was in the 70s, because we're listening to a record of a young teenage Colton with his granddaughter, a teenager as well. So you kind of know that she's going there next, right? But then they give you the flashback when Alice gets pushed in the pond, which is like the last scene from episode 1. And I have to say, I got goosebumps when I watched it. I got goosebumps again when they showed the flashback, because it was like somebody's watching you. Like she's, telling her mom, hey, somebody else knows about the pond. And she's looking around and then she gets pushed in the pond. So that gave me goosebumps. The flashback for the 2 seconds at the beginning of this episode gave me goosebumps again, because and throughout the whole episode you still don't find out who pushed her. So tell me who pushed her, please, in one of these episodes, because I'm dying to know. You have your suspicions, but nobody comes out and says it. You don't see the person. So that cliffhanger from last episode is still technically a cliffhanger because they never told us, but it was definitely an interesting episode. So she gets pushed into the pond. She comes back out and you see that she's in the 70s, right? And she sees 2 kids playing in the yard, but she recognizes Coulter's guitar. So, they're like, hey, who is that? And she speaks to them. She finds out it's Rick Augustine, which was Colton's best friend in high school. And his little brother, Vic, is actually Elliot's dad. So, there's definitely a connection there, right? Coulter's best friend was Elliot's dad. Brothers was Elliot's dad. So Elliot's dad is the little boy in the episode. So you see Rick, he's a teenager, Colton's a teenager. You see Dell as a teenager, Alice is a teenager, but then you see this little 10-year-old boy, and that's Vic. That's Elliot's dad. And he's kind of rude when Alice talks to him, but she just kind of talks to Rick, and Rick, doesn't pay him any mind. And then later when Kat jumps in the pond, because obviously Kat hears the message and says, oh no, I gotta go. So, they all go to the pond, and Kat jumps in, and she actually speaks with Vic too. She's probably about 10 minutes behind Alice, but when she was like, your name's Vic, of course you're Vic. And that was just kind of funny to me, because Kat was like, I know you as an adult and you were this difficult as a child. So that was kind of funny to me, because they know Vic is Elliot's dad and they know all the abuse and everything Elliot's dad had put him through. So that was kind of neat to see him. Even as a small child, he was kind of a prick. But you see this. You see that Alice is friends with Rick now. She goes and they're going to meet Colton and give him the guitar. And she's like, I can tune it for you. I'm familiar with this type of guitar. Like, she doesn't know what to say because she's familiar with that exact guitar. But she can't obviously say that. So, she kind of recovers and she goes with Rick. And she also meets Evelyn Goodwin, so you'll recognize that name because they're prominent in the community as well. And she is really good friends with Rick. And you kind of see them. I don't want to say like a bonfire. I guess it's a party on the beach, but it wasn't necessarily at nighttime. And then it gets to be nighttime, and this whole time, like I said, Kat jumped too. So Kat's kind of watching this too. She doesn't really know And then, she sees Alice, and Alice goes, "Hey, leave. I'm having a good time. I'm meeting my dad." Doesn't know it. So Kat agrees to leave, but she stays in the bushes and watches them sing together, which was a sweet moment. And then she leaves. But then, they also have a conversation, Jacob and Kat, when they're looking for Alice. They actually, or I'm sorry, Jacob confirms the note. So they had a book and they spilled something on the book and they noticed it had invisible ink on it. And before Kat left, like, Jacob confirmed, "Hey, that's Dad's writing." So they're like, "Okay, what does this message mean?" So, it's Alice enjoyed her time there. She stayed until nighttime. They were kind of having a party, and then they were ready to leave. Rick was like, "Hey, I'm going to go get some more beers, keep this party started." And Colton was like, "No, I'm going to walk, Alice and Evelyn back." So Colton decides to walk Evelyn and Alice home, and Rick decides to go get some more beer. And his little brother Vic, of course, is underage, and he's just walking around with them. He's like, "Yeah, you can come with me." So apparently we find out once Alice and Kat come back that that's the night that Rick dies. So, I mean, that was kind of a shock. Like, Alice meets this guy Rick, which is her granddad's best friend, and he dies that night, and Colton was supposed to be in the car with them, except Colton agreed to walk Alice and Evelyn home. So, I mean, that's kind of one of those things where God puts you in a situation, he puts you where you need to be. Sometimes in my own personal life, if I'm running late, I'm like frustrated that I'm running late, and then I think, no, maybe I'm running late because there's a car accident that I need to be not involved in, or, there's a reason why the time is the way it is. You ever think of that when you're running late for work, and then you finally get there and you found out you just missed an accident? If you were on time for work, that car could have been you. It's just one of those things where, especially in this situation, if Colton didn't walk the girls back, he would have been in the car with Rick and possibly died when Rick died. So it's just one of those things where Alice is meeting her dad for the first time and then finding out she's part of the reason why he didn't die that night. You know what I mean? So it's a lot to take in. Definitely a lot to take in. There's also a scene with Sam and Dell. And I mentioned this before. I'm so happy for Dell that she's in this relationship. She has had such a hard road. She lost her son, she lost her husband, and she basically lost Kat for 20 years. I mean, I guess 16 years, however old Alice is, 16, 17, because she never saw Alice until, they moved in with her when she was a teenager. So Dell was really alone, completely alone on this farm. So the fact that she is opening up to this man, Sam, who seems to have a really good heart. I like Sam. I hope there's nothing bad that happens with Sam, because I think Sam is great for Dell. And they've been together this whole time. So it said in episode 1, 9 months had passed. So we're assuming this isn't much after that. So they've been together, almost a year. And Sam actually tells Dell he loves her. Dell can't necessarily say it back, and then she does. "I hope you know how I feel about you." So I kind of like that they're, progressing along. Sam obviously doesn't know anything about the pond, but I feel like she's finally getting some comfort and a companion that I feel like she desperately needs. I still enjoy the conversations Dell has in the bedroom when she's talking to Colton, and you see Colton sit on the bed, obviously not in real life, but you can kind of tell she's still talking to him, and she's still getting those notes, which I think I would be talking to Colton too, because she doesn't want to tell Kat or Alice or Elliot about the letters. So that didn't come up in this episode, but I have a feeling we're going to see that again, because obviously somebody is sending her these notes. So it didn't come across in this episode, but I'm sure it will in the episodes to come, and try to find out who's behind it. But it was definitely interesting to see Elliot's dad as a kid. I mean, and Evelyn Goodwin, she was really close with Rick. It almost looked like, they kind of said, or I'm sorry, not Rick, Colton. I think Evelyn, when Colton would sing, she would dance, and she was kind of the flower girl, very free. but I kind of felt like she had, feelings for Colton, or they grew up together. Rick even said, no, they're like best friends. So, because Rick was like, I hope you're not into Coulter. And Alice was like, no, because obviously that's her grandfather. But Rick was like, good, they're really good friends. So you kind of get that feeling that they've known each other for a while, her and Colton. And then when Kat is trying to find out where Alice is, she gets picked up by a gentleman in a van named Jasper, but she sees the Coils kind of like bumper sticker on the car, and she's like, oh, do you know Coils? He's like, yeah, I'm the owner of Coils. So then you find out that Jasper is related to Thomas, right? So he is actually a Coil himself. So Kat was like, oh my gosh, I gotta find out what happened to Thomas. Like, do you know anything about his history? And he goes, yeah, I'm related to Thomas. Kat finds out he was happy. He had a big family. They all lived in New York. So I think Kat had a little bit of closure with that. Because like I say, in the last episode, I'm a fan of Kat and Elliot. However, I liked Thomas. I liked Kat with Thomas. It's just one of those things where I knew nothing was going to come of it. So to me, it was just a little bit of flirtation. But I feel like they've closed the book on that. She went back. She talked to Suzanne. She talked to Thomas. She even talked to Elijah. They all know Jacob's safe. So in my opinion, I don't really think they're going to have her go back in time again. And I don't think Jacob should. I know people are like, Jacob should go back and live with Elijah. I don't think so. I think Jacob needs to stay in present time. I feel like as much as we enjoyed, her going back to 1814 for the last 2 seasons, I feel like they've closed the book on that. Now we're focusing on the 70s and Del and Colton's relationship, and definitely Casey from last summer about being in the future. I hope they touch on that soon too. But yeah, I kind of feel like her finding out Thomas was happy in New York, he had a family, makes her feel good knowing that Thomas escaped. Because remember when she said goodbye that last time, he was like, I'm catching a train, like I gotta get out of this town, right? So it's kind of nice to know that he made it. He was happy and has a lot of family in New York. So that I think was good for Kat to hear. You could tell she was a little relieved when he said that. And then Jacob does come clean to his mom and say, hey, I didn't want to come back. I didn't choose to. I kind of had to, and so I think that was a good kind of conversation that Jacob and his mom had, because his mom was kind of coddling him. I think she still thinks of him as a little kid. And I think, she and him are having that relationship that he's an adult. She's got to treat him like such, and he didn't want to come home. He did some bad things. He's an adult. We all do things we regret. And she needs to come to terms with that, So I think that was a good bonding moment when they have those conversations. But then when they go to the book release, you see this gentleman and he kind of has an outburst, and you're like, okay, who is this person, right? Because remember, Kat gets the book released in Suzanne Augustine's name. So they have this book release, and you find out it's Evelyn's son. So remember, you just saw Evelyn back in the 70s, the flower girl, kind of free and just kind of, carefree person. This is her son who's outbursting at the book release, saying that it's tarnishing their history and their name. So, and then Jacob, comes in, defends Kat, but kind of comes on really strong. And the boys and his son's like, well, how do you know? And he's like, because I lived it. And we were like, okay, Jacob, we need to take it a step back. Nobody's going to believe you actually lived in 1814 and firsthand. But it was still nice to see, even though he was forced to come home, he still, cares for Kat and wants to defend him. And Del kind of had that as part of her conversation later on too. Like, I know you don't necessarily feel part of the family, but the fact that you defended your sister, really means that you belong here. So I know some people want him to go back. I don't. I want him to stay. I want to see what Jacob does. And then what I didn't mention was Back at the beach party, you see a young Dell, and I have to say, Hallmark, well done, well done. That little young actress who's playing young Dell, she's a spitting image of Annie McDowell. I mean, it is amazing. She looks just like Annie McDowell, in a younger version, in my opinion. I think the casting was great. So as soon as I saw her, I'm like, that's Dell, because it looks so much like her. So, and I love that. I think that was great. And she was kind of, her first meeting with Colton, you think young love, like, oh, she's going to swoon over Colton. And she wasn't. She kind of schooled him. I mean, she kind of was straightforward with him. And I like that, young Dell, she had some sass. She didn't really, she's like, yeah, okay. And I was like, great, you're not swooning over him, you're just not necessarily playing hard to get, but she just was keeping to herself. And I like to see that, because you see Dell and she had to have some attitude and some sass to go through everything she went through, right? Women come out stronger. We go through the storm and we come out better. And so I feel like, Dell has gone through so much. She's a very strong woman. And I like to see that she's got a little bit of sass in her teenage years, and she just doesn't swoon over Colton. Obviously, we found from the first two episodes, or the first two seasons, that Colton and Dell really had this love story. And when the kids were younger, Kat and Jacob, that they really had this strong bond. So to go back and see them meet for the first time at this beach party and her be kind of sassy, I was like, I like it, I like that. Let's see where this goes. So I hope Alice goes back. I mean, we know she does because she's on a record with Colton, but we hope, she meets Dell, and maybe Dell will remember, because remember, Alice saw her mom as a teenager and saw Jacob as a little boy, and she remembers, she'll say like, oh yeah, I had a friend named Alice when I was a teenager. So maybe the same thing's going to happen for Dell. Dell's going to be like, oh yeah, I do remember a young girl named Alice. So we haven't seen that yet. I hope that comes up. But what I do love is the end of the episode. As always, that always leaves me with more questions than answers, but it always gives me a cliffhanger. On a side note, Kat does agree to move in with Elliot, so I love that. I feel like they're moving their relationship forward, and I really think Elliot is so good for Kat. And I'm just going to say this one thing, because I know not everybody is on the Kat Elliot roller coaster. But you got to think it from Elliot's point of view, right? Because when he was a teenager, he met Alice. So think of being 17 years old. You're in love with your next door neighbor, Kat. And then you find out that you see her daughter from 30 years from now, and that she married the snobby boy you don't like, because she married Brody and had, Alice. So Elliot's like, I like this girl, but obviously I'm not going to get together with her because I just met her future daughter. So, I mean, he's got to kind of live with that. And then he has to know, I can move away, but I got to come back because Alice is going to come see me. You know what I mean? So to have all that, I think would be hard. Can you imagine your 20s and your 30s saying, well, I know when I'm 35, I'm going to see Alice again because that's going to be real life. You know what I mean? So I think that's a lot for Elliot to live with and still have feelings for Kat. So, I mean, you need to kind of think the way Elliot was raised too. Raised by Vic, who was a terrible father to him. Colton was really his father. He's in love with Kat. And he didn't have anybody to go to. And then he's this journal because, he sees Alice, and Alice is like, no, you don't get together with my mom because you're not my dad. And, and I think that's just a lot to take in as a teenager. So that's why I think I'm so happy that they're finally together. So that's my little Kat and Elliot spiel. The end of this episode, it leaves me with so many questions. I'm so excited for the next episode because Alice goes to jump in the pond and she sees Colton in the pond upset. Like it's almost as if Colton jumped in and then, comes out and he's splashing the water like he's mad that he didn't go back, or that he's mad that he's in the same, decade. So then you're like, what does this mean? Colton knows about the pond. He's a teenager. He jumped in it and he's mad. There's other times where we've seen people be mad. Kat's jumped in the water and been upset because she was expecting to go back to another time and didn't. So they say the pond takes you where you need to go. But I think this explains, like, we knew Coulter knew about it. We had flashbacks with him and his granddad, or him and his dad, but now we know he actually time traveled, because now he's in the pond and he's mad, like he wanted to go to another decade. So I'm so curious to have Colton tell us where he's been. And then you see Colton and Evelyn sitting by the pond. So, you know, they mentioned in the beach scene that Colton and Evelyn were really close, right? So now, and she even said like brother, sister. So now it makes you think Colton definitely knows, but now he's frustrated and you know, kind of talking out his personal issues with Evelyn. Like him and Evelyn are having this kind of discussion by the pond, and Alice walks up on them. So, I mean, they're talking about the pond. Does Evelyn know? Or, like, you know, so that shows into another layer. I tell you, this is just an onion that we're peeling back. And this reminds me, or this triggers me on the episode where they went back and had that big party at the mansion, remember? And it was when Elliot was going to run away with Kat, and then you know, Kat gets hit and goes to the hospital, and that's when Brody proposes to her and they find out she's pregnant with Alice. So, I mean, that was a big deal. Remember, they talked about that. It was something that happened in the town that nobody ever talks about again. Remember, Alice was like, what was so horrible about it? I want to jump in the pond and relive it. So I feel like they kept saying, and even Dell has like, we owe them, we owe them, we owe them. So I'm thinking, if Evelyn knows about the pond, maybe that has something to do with why, you know, because Kat even said, why do we owe them? What have they done for us? You know what I mean? So I feel like that might tie into it, that Evelyn knows about the pond and something else happened. But you're also going to hopefully hear about Dell, because I think the little tease for the next episode is Dell's going to tell us a little bit more about the childhood and her meeting with Colton. Because if she met Alice, I mean, she doesn't remember. I mean, maybe this is going to jog her memory. So, like I said, very great episode, loaded with information as always. You answered some questions. I still have some questions left, especially who pushed her in the pond. Was it Colton? Was it Evelyn? Was it who pushed her in the pond? And what was the sweater? So when Elliot went to the pond, he saw a sweater and he brought it back to his house. And then he saw his dad was there. So yes, definitely strange, right? You find out that Alice meets Vic, Elliot's dad, as a child. And then in real life, Elliot's dad, Vic, comes to visit Elliot to basically tell him, like, look, I'm getting married. I know I wasn't a good father to you, but this woman has changed my life. I'm happy. I want to settle down with her. And, you know, I want you to be my best man. So it looks like Vic finally, after all these years, is turning into somewhat of a nice person, so to speak, and he's asking Elliot to come to the wedding. But I just think it was odd. We don't know who pushed Alice into the pond, but when they all went there, Elliot took up that sweater, which obviously I assume was from the person who pushed Alice. Because remember, when Alice and Kat would time travel, they would keep clothes by that tree so that they could take on and off, you know, whatever time period they were in. So that's what reminded me of it. Like, oh, okay, whoever's time traveling is doing the same thing, putting their clothes by this tree. Elliot sees it, he grabs it. And it's like I feel like he recognizes it, because why else would he grab it? Otherwise he would say to Jacob and Dell, like, what is this sweater? You know, I found this. And he doesn't say anything. He just kind of swoops it up as if he knows and takes it to his house. And then you don't see anything else about it because you're distracted by Vic being there, you know, in that conversation. So I hope in the next episode, Elliot explains it, or Hallmark explains what that piece of clothing was that Elliot kind of took up, and because I feel like that belonged to the person. So definitely, again, great episode, more questions than answers. I hope you enjoyed my review. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any theories or you want to spin theories, leave me comments. I love to go back and forth and have a discussion. So again, thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.